Are they doing what they have been mandated by the people to do, or are they just singing to the tunes of the executive on whatever political kingpin they're looking to seek to have favor of? Now, commercial banks will now be at liberty to charge interest rates as they please on loans. This is after the National Assembly failed to overturn a memorandum by President Uhuru Kenyatta that wanted the rate cap removed. MPs failed to raise numbers required to overturn President Kenyatta's reservation of their earlier attempt to retain the limits on interest rates at 4% above the base lending rate as set by the central bank. Only 161 members were present in the House against the threshold of 233. In his refusal to assent to the finance bill, President Kenyatta said the interest rate cap stifled borrowing by SMEs.
Electronic, as has been displayed, total present 136. Manual present 25. Total 161. The net effect therefore, the net effect on the motion is that the ayes have it and the motion is carried because we were not able to raise the 233 to take a vote, a vote either way. So the ayes have it. Motion is carried.
And just a reminder of who the panelists are today. We have Nerima Wako, who's the Executive Director of Siasa Place. We have Bashir Suleiman, who's a lawyer, as well as Honorable John Kagoshia, who is a Speaker of the Nyeri County. Now, they did not turn up. So, I mean, at the very least, bringing the quorum that was needed. I'll start with you, Mr. Bashir. When you see this type of failure for members of the parliament who have been, elected essentially to represent us, not showing up to do what what is literally their job, what's your take on it?
I think in the event we were having a bill that will have proposed to increase the PACs, the allowances and the salaries of the members of parliament, the attendance will be overwhelming. The Constitution requires the two-third majority. There's a two-third majority requirement under the Constitution in the event the President sends back a memorandum that cites the reasons for his rejection of a bill. Yeah. In this case, this was a tactical move on the part of parliamentarians not to show up on in the House. Yeah. This is not the first time that we have had such a scenario. When this parliament was passing the Security Laws Amendment Bill, we have had dramas and a lot has been going on. Yes. This parliament has recently passed the Data Protection Bill. That has been enacted into a law. That will be enacted into, yes, we expect His Excellency to sign it into a law. This is a house that has put aside very important legislations and has focused on legislations that are politically centered. They are focused on bills or specific reports that are in the interest of the government. Yeah. They have not clearly appreciated the concept of separation of powers. They are yet to appreciate their roles under the Constitution. They are yet to appreciate their powers to even impeach the head of state. This is a house that has been bullied or even patronized by the leader of majority and the Speaker of the National Assembly. We have, whenever a bill is before the House, because I had the opportunity of working in that parliament. Yeah. Ordinarily, you will hear the majority whip and the minority whips whipping the members to the House to see to it that a certain legislation carries the day. When we have such politically centered piece of legislation, these members ordinarily show in that House. Yes. When we have pieces of legislations that will adversely affect the interest of Kenyans, lest they are pushed around by the political leaders, they will not even concern themselves with attending to the House. Yeah. And clearly in this case, there might be instances or there might be a possibility whereby State House has prevailed upon the members not to show up, to gang up against the memorandum by the head of state. Yes. In the event the President has sent back a bill with a memorandum, if any amendment is made on that bill, any single amendment, it will require a two-third majority. Right. But it will require a simple majority for that bill to be passed in its own format. So this was a tactical ploy. This was a game on the part of the parliamentarians not to show up in such huge numbers, to have this bill as it is and to be passed in a way that appeases State House.
Absolutely. And now, Nerima, do you believe it was tact as opposed to them just not caring?
I think they care about other things. Personally, I do. And I do believe that they were standing their ground in terms of who they are going to support at this moment, and it wasn't the people. And if we are to think about our general politics, where it's very difficult to be in parliament or be an official and to criticize, and it shouldn't be the matter. You should be allowed to criticize. Not every decision that's made is going to be right, and it doesn't mean that you have to agree with it. But the way our politics is played, if you criticize, you're seen as being an opposer to your own party, to your own leadership. Criticizing doesn't mean that you do not love. Just because I criticize my president doesn't mean that I do not love my president, or I do not love my country. But I do think that we're witnessing who they are there to represent. If it was truly the people who voted them and elected them in, they would have known the cries and what the pangs and hearts of the people are, and where people stand. We've been very clear about it when it came to this financial bill. But you could see that they are not that connected to the people, and they are not really feeling the heat from their own representatives. And they would rather follow their own leadership, even though maybe a lot of them do not agree. In fact, they will tell you personally if you talk to them that they don't agree, but they will not outwardly say that they do not agree in front of their colleagues, in front of their party leaders. And for me, I think what we're lacking is the guts to stand up when something is wrong within that house.
I was about to ask, isn't that just a demonstration of cowardice? Because you are meant to be there to represent the people, for the good of the people. And unfortunately, we have an electorate that does not focus on what you were doing while you were in Parliament, but based on who you're behind or what tribe you are. Honourable Kagoshe, what's your take after you saw this unfold?
The members of Parliament have three important roles that they ought to play, and one of the roles is oversight and oversighting the executive. The other role is representation. They're supposed to be representing their people in Parliament, and the third role is actually legislation. Now, in this particular case, where they failed to turn up in sufficient numbers to be able to undo the president's veto, they failed in the three. First, they failed to oversight the executive. Secondly, they failed to represent their people. And thirdly, it was a total failure in legislation. If you look at the Speaker giving his verdict, they did not go to vote. Because there could not have been a vote being taken when we do not even have the numbers. So in that case, the kind of legislation we are referring to here is already failed in all ways. And if you look at the Parliament, we're having more than 400 parliamentarians in this country. But I want to commend a few of them who do a good job, because indeed we do have parliamentarians who do a good job, who always stand up in Parliament and who are very actively trying to do their job. But we also have a very huge number, like 80% of these parliamentarians, they just hide there. They are not known, they are not heard, we don't see what they do, we don't hear what they do. But of course you see some of them posing on photos representing Kenya in international fora. And I want to discourage that attitude and that approach by our parliamentarians, because you all seem to be cheering them up. If you go to New York, for example, as a parliamentarian, you do not go to Parliament to represent Kenyans when they need these interest rates capped. Please don't tell us you're in New York representing us. If for sure you cannot turn up in Parliament building to represent us on a critical issue of this nature. And that's why I think we need to have names published of those parliamentarians who even attended this session. We also need to know those others who did not attend, where were they? And media, just like is happening now with the issue of analysis of what is happening with our food, I think it's also important to also try and follow up on parliamentarians and politicians. Where are they? What are they doing? How are they helping Kenyans in whatever they do?
Absolutely.
Now, if you look at the issue of interest rate capping, it's unfortunate because I think as Kenyans we could have been duped, because well before the elections, around 2015, 2016, there was very serious clamor for capping the interest rates. And that was done, and the president and the deputy president were very vocal about it. They went out of the way to convince parliamentarians to support it, even though it had very serious resistance from the Bretton Woods institutions like IMF and World Bank. Not to say even the governor of central bank himself did not believe in it. And even with all that opposition, the president and the deputy president were able to marshal support of parliamentarians to bring on board the issue of interest capping.
Yeah.
Now, of course, after that, what we have seen happening is national and international financial institutions went out of their way now to sabotage that particular capping. And can you imagine what we are saying, what this means now? I don't know whether Kenyans can actually conceptualize what this means for them. In 2015, before this capping was put, we were paying interest rates as high as 26% in this country. What business will you do in Kenya where you're going to earn money, pay rent, pay your overheads, and still be able to pay an interest rate of 26%?
26%, yeah.
And it had come to 14%, and things were working all right. Although I know financial institutions were also sabotaging it by refusing to release credit, you know, alleging issues of risk.
Yes.
And I'm not thinking that this is going to improve how much money is flowing in the economy. I'm not very sure of that. But parliamentarians failed us in this one. And I would not want to give a blanket condemnation. I would want to congratulate those who are seriously doing their job because they are there. But we have some of them. I've seen even in the local events, very important local events where parliamentarians don't just turn up to represent their people or to work where they're supposed to work. I've seen that. And you wonder, how unfair would you be as a parliamentarian after your people voted for you? Then even where they need you, even in the local scene, you do not turn up.
That is a good point, and which brings me to the point of leadership in general. Is there a disconnect between what is democracy, what is leadership, and what we are electing for ourselves? Do we even know what we need? Bashir, when we send these people to represent us, we are adults. We vote, we walk there, we queue, we know what we are doing. But then they go every other 5 years and deliver the same intrigues, the same funny things, the same insults that we have been talking about earlier on. Even the women are playing to certain sexist sentiments that we were hoping to be rid of by the year 2019. So is there a disconnect between what is leadership, good leadership, democratic leadership, and what we seem to imagine is leadership?
What we have actually as leaders, some of them or majority of them may not even merit the tag leaders. In the year 2015, the National Assembly and the courts had more trouble than we have right now. The courts were issuing orders against the National Assembly, specific orders with respect to certain applications that were made before the High Court. One time the Speaker said that the Parliament is a distinct institution. The legislature is distinct from the judiciary. The judiciary should not encroach onto the powers and duties of Parliament. But now you seem to be slightly confused when you see the Speaker not equally giving such sentiments with respect to the relationship between the Parliament and the Executive. The Constitution has put in place under Article 1.3, it lists the various arms or the various organs of our state. Now we have specific chapters under the Constitution that we normally allude to the fact that this connotes the separation of power concept.
Right.
The Speaker, because then that the fact that at that time he sort of appreciated the concept of separation of powers with respect to the arguments that he was having against the judiciary, we equally expect him to remind us that we have separation of powers between the judiciary and, the legislature and the executive.
The executive, yes.
Then Parliament by then quoted Montesquieu, a political philosopher that came up or who coined the whole concept of separation of powers. But we seem to forget that we have these specific arms that are distinct but are interdependent. We cannot say that the executive should not at all come should not at all work hand in hand with the legislature. The same with the judiciary. These are organs that are supposed to be that are supposed to be interdependent. They are supposed to coexist when it comes to the exercising their powers and functions. When we have leaders that are singing or dancing to the tunes of the executive, they seem to not appreciate that role. Parliament, under the standing orders, is capable or has the capacity to summon a cabinet secretary to pose questions to a CS. That shows you that the executive appears before the legislature. Parliament equally is able to impeach the president. It does have the powers. It shows you the powers of Parliament with respect to the executive. Equally, the president has certain powers. The executive is capable of rejecting bills that were passed before the House. The judiciary is able to stop certain laws that were passed by Parliament. All this shows us that these organs are interdependent.
They're supposed to work together in a certain way, but then we're having a situation where the executive seems to be overbearing over the legislator, and the legislature seemingly somewhat, intimidated to a point of they're just pandering to the executive, or singing to the tune, or moving in a way that would be safe for their political future.
Clearly,
in a way.
And when we actually read the drafters of this constitution, part of the rationales behind doing away with the repealed constitution, the previous constitution, section 25, talked about it had a provision that stated all Kenyans were working or had an employment at the behest or at the pleasure of the presidency. The legislature had no such powers. We now have an elaborate constitution that gives distinct powers to the legislature. In the event Parliament fails to exercise its oversight role and the law-making function, we are doomed.
Absolutely.
In the event the executive fails to stick to its executive powers, as enshrined under Chapter 9 of the Constitution, we are equally doomed. We really need to have a Parliament that is supposed to understand its core mandate. The Center for Parliamentary Studies and Training, CPST, used to have trainings for parliamentarians. I think it's important that they again recall all the members for another training to make them understand about their roles.
Because when we're choosing them, sometimes we are not able, we have someone who has the leadership skills, but at the same time not necessarily informed as you would love them to be on how they should operate while in Parliament. And I mean, Nerima, isn't there where civil society is supposed to step in and ensure even the electorate is educated on the type of leadership they should be voting in, while the parliamentarians are also in a way educated and empowered enough to know that this is what we need to do. We can do impeachments, we can hold the executive to account. There are certain powers that are essentially their rights that have been given to them by the people.
Absolutely, and that's some of the work that we do, but there are also challenges with that, because as much as we go and educate the youth and things like that, you will find from ward administrators to MCAs needing training, because they actually, like, even us, we're not quite sure what our roles are. So when we have angry youth coming to our office demanding things, we don't even know how to assist them. And so it's now double-sided, where you have to also engage government, you also have to engage people. But we're also talking about a time where civil society is underfunded. When we moved from, now we're a middle-class economy, we have less international donors, and a lot of donors were the ones funding civil society. Government doesn't fund our work, or hardly does. And then you're talking about a lot of the work remaining on our shoulders with barely any resources. If our own government cannot fund public participation, which is in our constitution, where they're supposed to meet with the people, then we also have to find ways of funding such engagements and having public participation with the people. So I do think that it's going to be effort. It's going to take a lot of time to be able to do. I believe that there are people working on it, but there's also a shift where civil society now has to work hand in hand with county government. And we're seeing that, where now government actually spends more, because now they have the wing of public participation and they need assistance to how civil society has been carrying out participation. And they're going to need that assistance. But is that collaboration something that county governments are willing to have? We still have this where civil societies are viewed as evil societies. And then you're also seeing where...
Why would they be viewed?
Why would they be?
Yes.
Because they feel that we make the ground a little bit too hot for them.
Okay.
Because the people now start to demand more because they understand what they should be demanding.
As they should.
Yes, they should. But it doesn't make politicians happy. It makes their work more difficult.
Okay.
They just want to be able to maybe go to a harambe or something and give money and run.
Yes.
But at the end, should be making sure that people have access to services.
Yes.
Other than just donating a few shillings here and there.
Poisonous unga that we are talking about. You know, there are certain issues that we are looking to leadership to deal with, but then at the same time it's left to the media, civil society, and the people acting on what they know, and sometimes it's not much. Now, this is a failure that we have seen that has been demonstrated in through the media about the legislator. But then we had Moses Kuria saying we have failed the country. But then a lot of people asked, who is we? Who are we? Who is he talking about? And when we look at leadership and failure, we're not talking just about the legislator. We also have county governments. And Honorable Kagushia, do you have any insights on the kind of leadership that you're receiving at the county government level? That is, are they delivering as they should, or what is going on? Is there a replication of what we see with our parliamentarians?
Maybe I need to paint a picture of what we are having in our country. Can you imagine Moses Kuria is the one who is actually saying we have failed the country.
Exactly.
And you see, when he's saying that, we really do cover that particular event.
Yes.
And we broadcast that so much. And him and the other politicians have gone the whole cycle to the point of now even feeling so guilty.
Yeah.
But something is happening in our country. If you look at the firebrand activists and civil society that we had a while ago, led by the likes of Kiraito Murungi and James Orengo, what happened is that after they were civil society members, and they did a good job for quite some time, all of them again shifted and went to government. And from that time, what has been happening is that anyone who is actually in the civil society, even if you ask my friend Elima here, their ultimate goal is normally to go to politics. When she looks at herself, I'm sure she probably looks at herself as a very serious governor or a women rep.
Because that's how it goes, actually.
You know, every other
From the mandamanos, then slowly they seep into politics, and then they're part of the ship, and then we forget about it.
Yeah, and that's how the civil society wave and agenda in this country has been absorbed, has been neutralized, basically.
And even in journalism.
That is it.
The very vocal journalists who speak for the Mwananchi, for the things that are being done for them, the lead poisoning and what have you, slowly by slowly they get into politics.
And those who don't get into politics, they now become the spokesmen of the politicians.
Yes.
If you look at every other county, they have absorbed the senior journalists, even in my county. Of course, they have taken all the best of the journalists in the media sector, and they have taken them in to be their spokesperson, to be their media heads, and all that. And for that reason, government has been taking into itself like this huge dragon that never gets full. It has taken every talent that we have in this country that can help us to retain our conscience clear. And when I also listen to Nelima, she says that, you know, government is not really sponsoring our activities, even public participation. If government sponsors your activities, you then become voiceless. You don't get that voice again. And so it's important that we still retain a vibrant civil society, especially in a country also where we are experiencing a very serious handshake. And with a handshake, you know what that means. Cessation of all hostilities of all nature. So that means that if you are on the other side of the divide.
Should it mean that there should be no opposition, because, or rather a sense of opposition?
That is how it is. That is how it has been interpreted. Ordinarily, it should not have been. But look at Kenya now. What is happening? That is how it has been interpreted, and every other politician is having their field day, and there is no much checks and balances that are happening in our country today because of what I have described as the people who are supposed to be checked. That's why the politicians then have now the leeway to do whatever they can do a full cycle and start checking themselves, and even feeling guilty and coming now to confess.
Saying, oh my gosh,
are you getting? That is what is happening. So it's important that we retain media as active as it should be.
Yes.
And new media people still remain as media and do a good job.
Society.
You know, the civil society should remain as such. We probably also need to have a serious opposition that is also going to help us. And when we say opposition, we are not saying opposition for the sake, and we are not talking of the opposition with violence.
Yes.
We are talking an opposition that is technically based on the ideologies, intellect, and able to engage on matters that touch on the common mwananchi.
Right.
And if that is done, if at the national level, at the county level, then you are likely to have governments, parliaments deliver even much better, and even the county assemblies, they are likely to perform better. If you come to, for example, in Nyeri County, I find a rather active social media activists, so to say. Even though some of them sometimes, they also try to look for the politicians in the evening to see also if they can get something to cool down. But you see, I still find that probably more than many other counties, we have more critics of government more than normal. And so that helps you also as a politician to always kind of be on the lookout, be careful about what you're doing. And it's important. I would say that's a very, very important component in governance in every country. And that is where also the international donors need to put more of their funds, not the other things I'm seeing happening today in the country on more of issues, morals and such. I think they need to more focus on governance. That's where, if anyone want to help us, that's where we need more help. So we have that challenge, and I would say it is not that it is any better even in the county governments. What you're seeing at the national level is much more replicated at the county level. And so as a country, we need to rise to the occasion and do much more to be more sensitive to what the common man needs.
Right, and Nerima has just told us, like, there's a need for education, but then the civil society is not funded. So they're having a problem. Civil society agencies are not funded properly as they used to be, and therefore are not unable to conduct the kind of education that they needed. And we have 2 years to the next election, and we're going to be faced with the same decisions that landed us with the same legislators. What do you foresee? I'll start with you, Bashir, in the next leadership, because they have delivered what they have delivered, and it has been properly splashed on the papers. We have seen for ourselves. We have seen the maze that we are having. All the scandals have been splashed out, and the war on corruption is ongoing. But I don't know about the efficacy, if you could speak about that. But then, do you see a change in the next general election? Are we on our way to this sort of enlightenment that will have us select the right leaders, or at least even the leaders who are now guilty themselves? Would they be changing to deliver more or better sorts of leadership?
And not unless I think citizens are educated, or they are told about what they are told on. They are working to certain realities. All the leaders that we have right now are the ones who are going to get re-elected.
Yes.
As Kenyans, we wake up in the morning, we go vote, not on the basis of ideologies and policies, but on the basis of politics and politics of political ideologies. Recently, what we witnessed in Kibra, we saw the youth engaged in violence. We saw the youth fighting each other. That clearly points to the fact that we should not expect a lot of changes in 2022, be it having a BBI report, be it having a referendum, whatever we are going to have, not unless things change. And I think the genesis of the entire problem is a poor economy. We need to improve our economy to improve the lives of the youth. Once that happens, once we have a sustainable economy, all the youth in this country will be leading a better life. All of them will be having a source of livelihood, and that sort of livelihood will enable them shun political violence. Right now, we have graduates who are on the streets who are interested in receiving 200 or 300 shillings from politicians to help them with political violence. That clearly points to the fact that the economic reality of this country is so doomed. Going forward, for the remaining 2 years, the head of state should work on the economy.
Right.
The economy should be improved. More opportunities should be created for the youth.
Yes.
Once we absorb the youth into a better sort of livelihood or better sort of sustainable economy, they will not need these politicians.
Yeah.
And it's until that point that they will be in a position to think critically and vote the political leaders on the basis of ideologies. I do not think any hungry stomach will one morning think about having a better leader, but would rather first think of having something in between the lips.
Yes, it's true.
So first thing first, not unless things change. These same crop of leaders are the ones we shall have re-elected by our youth.
Yes.
Then again, I think our politicians too, they should wake up. They should really appreciate their roles. They should be people-centered political leaders than being political leaders-centered politicians. I think going forward, both the youth or the entire population of this country should reason, should sit somewhere, think about the critical economy that we have in this country, and the political class should equally wake up to the realities that we have in this country.
Absolutely.
And come 2022, I think we need to subject them to evaluations on the basis of the developments that they have brought to the tables of our country.
And Bashir, I have legal minds today on the panel. Is it impossible to recall them if they're not, why aren't we doing this? We've talked about them being able to impeach a president. Is it not possible for us to do something when they are not delivering to their mandate?
Very well. Yeah. Right now, the Honorable Speaker from Kiambu will even tell us, we have the citizenry who have gone back to collect signatures with a view to impeach, with a view to recalling their political leaders.
Yes.
That is exercisable under the law, but it is not easy as such. One. Two, normally we have had leaders who go to court. They end up appreciating, or they end up applying for injunctive orders against their removal. That has happened a number of times. We have had county assemblies, leave alone even the citizenry, exercising their role and impeaching a governor. Then the governor, in his clamor to retain that seat, goes to the court, obtains orders, and again sits on an order with a view to retaining that seat. We have county assembly speakers who are at the moment, who have been impeached by the assemblies, but on the basis or taking advantage of court orders, they are now able to still sit on their seats. This now discourages the citizenry from engaging in such recall processes. Yeah.
Now, Mneri, what's your take on us not being able to impeach leaders when they do not, or recall them when they not deliver? And looking forward to 2022, is there hope for a new crop of leadership?
It's frustrating because our constitution gives us so much power, but in reality, vitu kwa ground
Need different.
Need difference because it gives us direct power.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think way too much. If you compare our constitution to other countries where we're engaged, even asked about legislation or kinds of policies, kinds of services, there are some countries that people are not even given that opportunity. But ours spells it out for you to even particular rights and very specific, to even housing, education, water, specific. And I think to be given so much power to the point where chapter 1 starts with we, the people, and then us not even understanding that power or even being in an environment that encourages that power makes it frustrating because as much as we engage with the public, the first thing they tell you is, now, what am I supposed to do? This avenue, I tried and I was blocked. I can't do anymore. There are so many other things I'm stressed about. And then you want me to now go and kick out a politician. At what time?
Exactly.
And me, I'm trying to hustle and get even money to be able to eat and a roof over my head. I don't have the time to do this. So it's intensive.
So it's like a vicious cycle. The political leaders are not giving us the right economic situation, the right leadership to make our lives easier. At the same time, we are so busy trying to fulfill those needs that we do not even have time to focus on the kind of leadership that they're giving us. So it is it is a cycle. But I also think that 2022, or whenever we have the next election, we will see change. Because when we look at MCAs, for instance, the turnover is so high. Yeah.
It's so high because people watch. They are seeing, when was the last time this MCA talked to me or came home, an MP, a governor. They watch. So it means that people are really looking out for services, and the more difficult our economy is, the more observant they will be.
Yeah.
That I'm sure of. And a lot of MCAs are below the age of 35. They are young. In fact, 700 of them, over 700 of them. And if they're all young, this is their first political venture. So they would be interested, if remaining in politics, to go on to the next level of politics after an MCA. So they need to be able to pay attention to that as providing services to their constituents or their who those that they represent. So I do think we might not see a change in the executive when we're talking about the presidential ballot and all that. But when we come down to MCAs, to MPs, we will see change. I believe we will.
Honorable Kagusha, are you in agreement about the county government level? Well, is there a promise of change in terms of, based on whether they've delivered this time round or not?
Yeah, probably I just need to first of all correct, I am the speaker Nyeri, not Kiambu.
Not Kiambu, yeah.
So Kiambu, but in Kiambu indeed they are recalling their governor. I've seen them collecting signatures. And so it is not far-fetched that this can be done. But I also want to point out that it is not very easy to recall an elected leader. If you go through our constitution, there are so many roadblocks that have been put to ensure that on your way to impeachment and to recalling, you are completely prevented from achieving your goal. Yeah, so now we have county governments which to some extent, I think, especially the county assemblies, I think they are doing much better than what the National Assembly is doing. If you look at, indeed, the MCAs have exercised their oversight role much better than the National Assembly in many counties. I've seen many MCAs recalling the executive and recalling them for good reasons. And this to me is positive. I don't think that can happen at the national level today, that the parliament recalls a cabinet secretary for whatever reason. But in county assemblies, that has been done.
But why though? Why is it difficult at the higher level? The politics surrounding it?
Yeah, I think the executive has been able to exercise its power much more on the legislature in a bigger way
than the other way.
And the legislatures have refused to rise up to the occasion. They have cowed, even though they have been given the authority to oversight by their voters. But in the county assemblies, that happened. And I am not even very sure many cabinet secretaries in this country fear the parliament anymore. I do not think they think parliament is so important anymore.
Which is unfortunate.
So they walk and do their work as if there's nobody checking them. But for the county assemblies, it's a little bit different. A lot of the CECs in the counties do fear MCAs. Of course, MCAs, to some extent, they're also known for some outrageous demands. But also in many cases, you find MCAs who genuinely just want a CEC to perform. They just want you to do your work.
Deliver.
And once you have delivered, then you find that you are not in trouble with them. Because after all, MCAs don't look up to the governors anymore for financial benefits. And that's why you see speakers are in a lot of trouble, because MCAs now look up to their speakers and to their own assembly, because the finances now are actually separated. We have our own finances in the county assemblies. And so for that reason, then MCAs are not so dependent on the governor, except maybe for the performance in terms of development in their wards. And for that reason, then, they demand more and better performance in their wards. And what you're looking for is Association of the County Assemblies, which we call the CAF County Assemblies Forum, is whereby we are going to have the county assemblies completely separated from the governors, especially when it comes to the issue of finances. Because as we talk now, county assemblies do go through the CEC finance to be able to access their budgets.
Yes.
But now we want that stopped, so that as a county assembly, you're just in charge of your own resources, including requisition for the same.
Yes.
So that at no one point will the county government executive demand that you do certain things for them to release for you funds. It happened in one of the counties, which is just next here.
Yeah.
And they went for 6 months without a pay because apparently they could not agree with the governor on certain aspects. So we want to separate that completely. And if that is done, MCAs are going to put governors to check much more than it has happened before. And also the other thing we also want to be done is that the money to be appropriated directly to the wards from Nairobi, from the National Assembly, from the Treasury. That money is appropriated directly to the wards. So that again, an MCA doesn't have to go kneeling and lifting their hands for a governor to develop their wards. So that then an MCA has money is directly to the ward. Not the MCA shouldn't be the one to execute. It is the governor and the executive to execute. But the money is set for that ward. That then means that the MCA will be much more independent. The MCA will be having their own development agenda in their wards, and the money will be there to do that. And then they will not depend on the governor even for their little allowances that they normally receive. That means that they will be much more independent.
Yes.
Yeah, and that way they will check the county government more. And we are getting there, I can tell you. We are receiving quite a lot of support, and I want to thank His Excellency the President because he has been listening to those requests, and he is positive towards that. And we are also happy because the Senate and the National Assembly are also listening to that, and we seem to be getting positive feedback from all those bodies and organs, and we believe that eventually that will be done. And MCAs will be much more independent, and then accountability will be much better in the county governments.
Absolutely, and that is the view from the county government. It seems that the legislator could learn a few things from the county governments. Yes, and thank you so much for bringing this out. We've had Bashir Suleiman, a lawyer, and we have Neribo Wako, Executive Director for Siasa Place, as well as the county the Speaker of Nyeri County, Honorable John Kagusha. Thank you very much for your sentiments.